All right, so Sage's last review of the day is going to be for Assassin's Creed Shadows. Sage, what do you think about this game?
It's kind of like the MCU where I keep thinking, I think I'm done with this franchise, and I keep getting pulled back in, I've played all of them, like except for Mirage, that came out last year, or maybe that was 2023. But I still somehow I've played every single one of these games. I completed this at around, I believe it was about 70 hours it took to do everything. Um, and it's a little bit of a mixed bag here. I think it's very hard, probably for most people that play a lot of games, to come to this and not think of Ghost of Tsushima, especially because people have been saying for a decade plus at this point, "Come on, Assassin's Creed, make a game set in Japan." Like back when the Ezio games were still coming out, people were saying, "Hey, let's go to Japan, do a game in Japan. That'd be a really great setting." And then they waited so long, um, and another game, Ghost of Tsushima, came around and did, an open world game with samurai gameplay, but also stealth mechanics, and it did it so well, that I think it's going to be hard for this game to totally step outside of that shadow. Um, but yeah, let's give it a fair shake, right? So you come in here, you got two playable protagonists here. You have Naue, who is a shinobi, and the game starts off with her family getting murdered by this gang of like six villains. They do like a super villain lineup and everything when they kill her father in like the opening sequence of the game. And she swears revenge, right? She's going on this revenge quest. Meanwhile, one of the people she is targeting, Oda Nobunaga, who is Yasuke's retainer, of course, and then Yasuke is your second playable character, and that's how he kind of gets tangled up in this whole conspiracy. When Nobunaga dies, these two come together. They realize that they're kind of working towards the same goal. They partner up, and from there, the story kind of drifts into the background of the gameplay, for I'd say most of the game here. Um, and that's not to say that it's a bad story, but it is a bit of a forgettable one. Yasuke, I think, is more interesting of these two protagonists. I think the stranger in a strange land archetype is just more unique, at least within the Assassin's Creed franchise. There's not been too many games with that setup. But with Naue's revenge story, this franchise made its name with Ezio being a revenge story, right? And that was executed so well that you're kind of setting yourself up to really have to live up to something great in doing that. And I don't think it her character ever really expands beyond just kind of that basic revenge quest archetype. So there's moments here and there where these characters do have some chemistry with each other, and their friendship can be enjoyable. But their bigger goals, like the ends that this game is kind of striving towards, well, one, I feel like it's kind of hard to stay engaged because the game is it spends a lot of time on there's this big tree of quests that you're on, right? You've got like the six targets that kind of kicked everything off at the beginning. You got to take all them out, and then but as you discover more and more of the world, there's these other circles of other targets, and all these things kind of appear on this menu, and it gets to be so big that it's not even that it's unmanageable, but I think you lose track of what the main story thread is. Yeah, all of these side threads, none of them necessarily feel like the main story at a certain point. Like you're kind of just assassinating targets. And one thing that this game is missing that I think the last game that I remember really doing it was Origins. But if you played any of the older Assassin's Creed games, you know that the franchise used to have these. moments where when you would assassinate a really important target, there would be this kind of moment where the world would melt away and it would just be the animus background and your protagonist and the target. And they'd have a, it's kind of a deeper conversation about why they were doing what they did and how they were right philosophically from their perspective. It was something that made the Ezio games really, really great back in the day. And the last game that did that was Origins. And this game, I think, is really sorely missing that element of it. Because I think without that, all of the villains and the targets, they end up melting away. You kind of forget about them as personalities as soon as you killed them. Now, on the flip side, the gameplay of getting to that point and actually killing them, I think that is actually pretty excellent. The way that you maneuver through the world, the animations for the parkour, actually flipping around on the rooftops, getting down from places, climbing up, all that maneuverability, that's really strong. Really, really like that. You get a lot of tools to navigate. It's some of the best stealth I think the franchise has ever had with Naue. You can knock out lights to create more shadow. I mean, literally, Assassin's Creed Shadows. It's in the gameplay itself as an actual mechanic. You can approach different areas in really different ways, depending on whether it's daytime or nighttime. They'll have different like patrol and numbers of guards. And on top of that, you also have this really great, and this is, I think, new. I don't think this has been done before, a season cycle. So not just a day and night cycle, but a season cycle where it'll change from spring to summer to winter to fall. And you have a really cool set of mechanics here where, let's say, try to get into this castle, and the best way in is to use like a reed to swim underneath the surface of the water and breathe up through the reed. You can swim in, and you can get like pretty much all the way to where you need to go just by doing that. Let's say it's winter, that water's going to be frozen over. You have to then go, all right, what's a completely different way to approach the situation? And there's a lot of great examples like that that are they're very dynamic. That as you go into these different areas, super super well done, super creative. I would love they're talking about like a Black Flag remake right now. If you could make a remake of that game, like get that season change thing going on, bring that from this game back over to that would improve that game tenfold. Like I cannot like say enough how good I think this like the stealth and the seasonal mechanics are in this. The combat pretty good. It is if you've played any of the RPG Assassin's Creed games, you're going to be pretty familiar with it. It's the like R1, R2 trigger for your melee swing. You got your ranged stuff. It's basic in a certain way, but I think it works for this type of game. You don't want to get too complicated with all the weapon systems here, so it's pretty standard. Like, hey, you get your loot. It's like legendary, common, rare, that sort of thing, color coded to see how valuable it is. Higher level stuff, you replace it. It can get a little tedious at times, switching everything out as you find better stuff. But I do think it is much more manageable than Valhalla, which is the last major game. Which personally, I actually disliked Valhalla quite a bit, even though that's Ubisoft's highest selling game in the franchise, which I think the pandemic had a lot to do with. But that being said, I think this game does understand that that game was a little too bloated. It was a little too big, a little too much of it. As far as like side quests where you're kind of doing the same thing every single time you find one, or just busy work fetch quests, this game is a real improvement on that. I think its open world it's smaller. It's still big, but it's smaller. It is more compact. It
Jeez.
is just straight out boom off the side there. I, I,
Hmm.
I enjoy doing that quite a bit. Um, but it is a more compact open world. It is able to, I think, streamline some of the bloated stuff about some of the previous games, the last two in particular. That being said, it still suffers from some of that open world bloat. There is still, I think, more than there needs to be. I think you could still make this smaller. You could still bring the size of the map down some because there is still, even though it's better, there is still some points where you're just wandering between two areas and there's really not anything in between them. Like you're just trying to get to the next area, and it's just a trek through this area with not really that much interesting to stop and do. The environment's beautiful. Like this game is beautiful looking. Visually, it's gorgeous. The environments are great. And again, with the seasonal changes that happen to go from winter to fall, the colors of the trees when that happens are beautiful. You actually get like you get to see that brief moment in the year where the cherry blossoms bloom and how beautiful that is and the effect on like the culture of the area that that creates. A lot of really great stuff there. But like I was saying with the story, and this is part of that, the one point in which the visuals do kind of drag it down a little bit, and this has just been, I don't know why, I don't know what the problem is, but this has just been the case with Ubisoft for a long time. But there's just these characters they just have a bad case of Ubisoft face. Like there's just something weird about the way their facial animations move. And like the it's like you remember people making jokes about like the animation and like the Telltale Walking Dead games where like the characters would have these very exaggerated expressions and they'd only have a few of them.
Oh yeah, I do remember that. Yeah.
These Ubisoft games, they have a little bit of that. It's not quite as maybe over the top as that is, especially because that had this more cartoony art style. But there is something about the animations in the faces in this that they just look very wooden. They're just not super expressive. And then when they do move, it can be very awkward and wooden. Um, like the models, the characters, the skin, the hair, the clothes, that all looks amazing. But just sometimes when they're trying to emote, it just isn't coming across.
Mm, yeah. You see a little bit of it here. Yeah, not too much expression there. I would say with the faces there.
Like the way the eyebrows move, it's like they're very up and then down, and then they feel like video game characters. Like there's a lot of the best games they kind of melt away, and you when you're truly immersed, you want to forget that you're playing a game, right? That's the goal ultimately, especially in an RPG, right? Which is what this is. You want to immerse yourself so fully in what's going on that you forget you're even playing a game. You're just experiencing a story. You're just engaged in what's going on, and the faces in this, you're constant, and it's not just this game. I mean, it's a Ubisoft, it's a company-wide thing. That last Star Wars game had this problem. Assassin's Creed 10 years ago had this problem. Um, but it takes you out of it during cutscenes when it's like you want to get into what these characters are talking about, but they're very rough face movements, and also just the dialogue. I just don't think is that great. It's very cliche. I think a lot of the time it's very tropey, especially with the revenge quest stuff. It's very simple. And it doesn't help that, like I was saying at the beginning of the review, this game lives in the shadow of Ghost of Tsushima. It does not help that later this year, Ghost of Yotei is going to come out with a female main character whose family is killed at the beginning by six villains that you then have to hunt down one at a time. So it's almost the same plot structure, even. But it looks like Ghost of Yotei is just doing it with a lot more personality and a lot more engaging, uh, emotive characters. And so, releasing the same year as that is not doing this any favors. And I do think in the long run, this game will be a little forgotten about in favor of that. I mean, we'll see how it comes out, but I think Ghost of Yotei is more than likely going to be a very impressive showcase. But yeah, listen, like I said, it's and I sound negative when I say that, but it's not all bad here. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff in this experience. I would describe this game as is it's a really good like podcast game. Like, do you want to sit down and play a game, but not fully pay attention to it? Maybe like, do you not want to totally have to think about what's going on in the narrative? Do you want to be able to put a podcast on or play music and kind of listen to something else at the same time and just kind of chill and explore? This is a really good game for that. To not feel, and maybe it sounds like a backhanded compliment because again, with the story not being the greatest, but it is the kind of game where you can kind of get lost in it, have something else going on. You're listening to something else, whether it's podcast or the news or music or just something else, and you kind of sink away and lose yourself in it. You can do it that way, and I think that's probably this game at its most effective. But if you're really like I was trying to really sit in, listen to the characters, absorb what's going on in the narrative, I think you can hit a bit of a wall with it because I think you're absorbing a lot of like junk food information with the story. It's a lot of like filler and kind of dialogue that doesn't go anywhere or really feel like it means a whole lot. Um, so yeah, ultimately the story here it's pretty weak, honestly. But I think it's held up by some very good gameplay, some very good exploration, some very fun combat and stealth mechanics that you can engage with, and a world that's visually a feast, right? Like a really amazing to look at. Then I also want to bring up that I encountered one like game-breaking bug in this game that is going to be a point docked off on the review because so this was a bug day one on release. I saw like posts from, or maybe day two, but I went online because I was like, how do I fix this problem? Saw a ton of people talking about this. Is a huge issue. Multiple patches have been released for the game, and this has not been fixed, at least not for everybody. And basically, what happened is an NPC that you need to speak to progress the main story quest was spawning in the wrong location, right? A decent ways away in like a completely different place on the map. And the only solution, and I did this, I did sit and I did this. The only solution to this problem, oh God, I didn't even see that.
So this is a
That's a simple
compilation
fix.
of the various bugs in the game that you can see here.
Okay. I didn't have overall too many, and little and visual glitches like this in a big open world game can even there can even be something charming about the jankiness to it at times if it doesn't stop you from making progress in the game. There could sometimes be something fun about having silly stuff like that happen. But the what I experienced was like a you can't keep playing the game. Like this, it broke the game. But what the solution was I had to so you can't even just run into the guy. You have to crouch and then slowly walk into the person and it'll get him to like kind of like back up a little bit. And it doesn't even work every time you do it. So I had to spend like 3 hours just doing this, slowly inching this guy. I had to get him like down like 6 flights of stairs out of a castle across like a whole bunch of roads and bridges into a different castle. And then finally it triggered so that you can speak to him again. That was obnoxious. That was a really obnoxious thing to sit through. And especially when it's like there's been multiple patches for this game. How is Ubisoft not fixing this problem already? Like I don't understand how that's not getting fixed faster. Because I mean, look, I'm not a coder. Maybe it's more complicated than I'm able to realize, but it's just this guy's in the wrong spot. That can't be that hard to fix, especially when so many people are having issues with this. I've seen worse bugs get fixed faster in other games. So it just to me it doesn't make sense that it's not together yet. Um, but you know, so I'm going to take a little bit of a point on that because that was like 3 hours of time I had to spend doing that. Um, but it's still, I'm still not going to say that that just negates any fun that I had with the game. There is still a lot of positivity that I do have here.
Mm. So it being a Ubisoft game, is it typical Ubisoft? Is it a little above average? Is it kind of typical when it comes to you?
I'd say it's above average with the gameplay. I think it is an improvement over the last couple AC games, and I think it's definitely better than a lot of the other like Far Cry or the Star Wars Outlaws game type stuff that you see coming out of the company. This did feel like it had more effort and more time put into it than some of those other titles did. Um, but it is still suffering from some of those typical Ubisoft problems, even though it is I think a step in the right direction. And I do think I want to praise them for that and say, keep going this way. This is a good start. Like this company should follow the positivity that this game has gotten and try and figure out why this has been received a bit better than some of their other stuff. So really highly encourage them to look at why this game is successful versus some of the other stuff they released. But it's still some of the typical Ubisoft problems, so it's not all the way there. But like I said, I want to praise where praise is due. Um, they've had a lot of misses for me in recent years. Like the last Ubisoft game I played and enjoyed before this was in 2017. So, almost 10 years later, hey, you know what? You guys got something that I think is at least decent. It's good, maybe good with a lowercase g, but I think good.
Mm. And you playing dual characters, as you said. Which character did you like playing the most?
I like the stealth gameplay of Naue probably overall the most. I think there's just a lot of options and creative ways you can approach the different environments. But in terms of the personalities of the character, I thought she was very boring in terms of like dialogue and stuff. So in terms of like who did I enjoy spending time with more, I enjoyed spending my time with Yasuke more, but she had more tools to mess around with, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And we saw a little bit of Yasuke, his gameplay of him just kicking people, Spartan kicking people all across the screen there.
You can
Easily,
just rip people apart.
yeah, very much a bulldozer tank type character there. So that's probably
You
pretty
can
fun.
Kool-Aid man your way through walls even.
Yeah, oh yeah, you see that with him. So that's pretty. That can be some fun for some players there. So where would you rank this Assassin's Creed game out of the other Assassin's Creed games you've played?
So I'd say I don't think it's as good as say the original Ezio trilogy or Black Flag or Origins. But I do think it is better than let's say Valhalla or Mirage or Unity, which was a complete mess when it came out. Say maybe I like Syndicate just a little bit more. I'd say it goes somewhere in the middle if I was to rank all of them and put them in order, somewhere near the middle or like the high middle. Like I said, there's a lot of good here. It's not fully able to escape the problems of the franchise, and it's particularly when it comes to the narrative part of the whole thing you really feel a sense of corporate, like focus group, like what's going to appeal to, the biggest mass number of players to make our shareholders happy and increase profit. Like there is even when I'm having fun with the game, there is a little bit of that sensation the whole time where you just I never once felt like, hey, somebody had a vision and they were like passionate about making this game. I feel like the people that made this game, I'm sure there were probably passionate artists mixed in here, but I think the kind of big budget and the bloated budget corporate interest of it, it keeps it ever from, really feeling like a piece of art. It always feels like a product. And at times it feels like a good product too. I don't know. Again, I don't want to discount any positive elements to this, but it does always feel like a product over being a piece of art. And I think that's important to know going into it.
Hmm. Score wise, it seems like it's kind of similar to Valhalla in terms of scores with critic reviews here. It did better than it seems like critically than Mirage, Assassin's Creed Shadows here. So it seems like mostly getting kind of we see here on Metacritic, PC 79 out of 100, console which you played it on PS5 81 out of 100. We have also Xbox there 85 out of 100. Open Critic score of 82%. You have that there. So it seems like generally kind of a slightly above average there.
Yeah,
Yeah, kind of got out of there. Um, Sales wise, you mentioned like you said, a lot of people. I think Valhalla is one of the highest grossing games for the
it is,
franchise.
I think, the highest. And part of that is the pandemic. That game came out when everybody was, I mean, it just came out when everybody was at home. And video
Mm,
game sales in general across the industry, across multiple franchises, console sales, everything was up, right? Everything was up. That's one of the reasons we've seen so many layoffs in the video games industry in the last couple of years, because these corporations, they think infinite growth is just always possible. So they mass hired during the pandemic because, oh, wait, way more people are playing video games. All our numbers are going up. And they were mystified when numbers went back down again after the pandemic, and they just could not grasp the idea that that was a temporary high. So that is part of why Valhalla did as well as it did. But this is, I believe, the second biggest launch after Valhalla. So, and fully out of the pandemic. So this game is standing on its own 2 feet as far as the sales go.
Yeah. So it says here, this is Wikipedia. So on the sales page here, so it says Ubisoft stated that Assassin's Creed Shadows surpassed 1 million players on its release date, had 3 million players within a week. Steam showed a concurrent player count peak of 41,412 on launch day, growing to 64,825 during the first weekend after launch. The feat established the game as the highest Assassin's Creed game by concurrent players on Steam to date. According to analysts, by market research from Securion, Shadows was the best-selling game of March 2025 in the U.S. and the second best-selling game of the year in the U.S. as of April, behind Monster Hunter Wilds and ahead of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. According to market research from firm GfK, Assassin's Creed Shadow had the largest physical video game launch in the United Kingdom in 2025, surpassing Monster Hunter Wilds. In March 2025, market research from New Zoo reported that it debuted as the second highest grossing game across the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, and Italy, trailing only Fortnite. According to Ubisoft fiscal report from 2024 to 2025, Assassin's Creed Shadow has surpassed Assassin's Creed Odyssey in consumer spending and achieved the second highest day one sales revenue in the history of the franchise, ranking only behind Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So you had that with it in terms of sale wise. So it seems like it's doing okay there sales wise. Yeah. So what would be your final rating for Assassin's Creed Shadow?
So I'm going to give it I'm going to say a high stream it. Now, I will say, if not for that game breaking bug that really soured a part of the late game experience for me, if that hadn't happened, I think I would give it just a regular tune in. So for people in the future, maybe listening to this later on, and a patch has come along and fixed that game breaking bug, it's a tune in for those people. But as of right now, until that bug is fixed, where you're going to have to do some total BS to like fix the game and get it to work, I'd say stream it. And because there's still, again, a lot of fun to be had here. Put a podcast on, find something to listen to. Maybe you're even hanging out with a roommate or a spouse, and they're doing their own thing, and they're reading a book, or you're listening to music together. And this is something to have on in the background. And again, it might sound like a bit of a backhanded compliment to say it's really good for background noise, but I do mean it genuinely. There's still a lot of fun and 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 good times to be had here. It's just not necessarily going to be like sucking you in and having you fully engaged in all aspects of it.
Hmm. Okay. Right now, people can get it for $70. You said to stream it. So would you recommend people maybe wait till it comes on, maybe like something like PlayStation Plus or maybe Game
Yeah,
Pass or
or like a good sale, yeah, or Game Pass or something like that. I mean, I would say, knowing, having played the whole thing and done all these every little bit of it that I could, spending like 70 hours on it, I would say I would probably very fairly spend about $30 on this and be very happy with that $30. Like very,
Hmm.
very, very happy with that. If that bug gets fixed, I'd say I'd even be very happy spending full price on it, but not until that bug gets fixed. Like
Yeah.
that is a big sticking point for me. Like, you, come on, Ubisoft, got to get these all the hundred. Again, it's we talked about this during the Claire Obscure Expedition 33 review. These giant companies have these multi-$100 million budgets, and these games come out and they spend months, if not years, still getting bug fixes down the line. And it's like, if you had a tighter team with a smaller budget, maybe you wouldn't have to do that. Maybe you'd be able to put something out that worked on day one. That you didn't have people get their progress halted with a brick wall.
Mm, yeah. So, that was Sage's thoughts. So, a high stream it for Assassin's Creed Shadow. People can pick it up now. There, maybe you want to wait a little bit till there's a discount. Maybe there's a sale kind of going on.
Oh, and one more thing too. I almost forgot to bring this up. This game doesn't have an ending.
Doesn't it? So it's like open ended. They want maybe a sequel to do with this, or
It's going, so the actual ending is going to be a $10 DLC that's going to be coming out sometime in the future. Uh, the way the game ends is literally you go to talk to an NPC about like the next mission, and they have a whole conversation about what the next mission they're going to go do is. And then as they're walking away, the camera goes up to the sky and the logo comes out, and then it goes to credits. And it's like that was one of the most abrupt endings I think I've ever seen in anything. And then you go online, you look it up, and it's like, oh, that's because they literally they couldn't they are either they did it intentionally, maybe the execs wanted to sell this and cut it off for extra profit. But something tells me that even after all the time they've had to make it, because the game was just so big, I think they still were rushing to finish it a little bit. And I honestly think they just couldn't finish the mission in time for the game's release. And so they had to chop it and then release it as like an expansion. Now, if you got the launch day edition, which is what I have over here sitting on the counter over there is a code in the box to get this DLC for free. So you
mm,
don't have to buy it. But if you bought the game, a month, 2 months, 3 months after it came out, a year later, you'd still have to drop another $10 to get the ending, which is really shady and scummy. Now, if they just put it out for free because they were like, hey, we couldn't finish this, but it's going to be free when it comes out, don't worry. I wouldn't even care. I'd be like, you know what? Fair enough. Team's under a lot of pressure, corporation breathing down your neck. I get sometimes stuff just isn't going to be finished on time because the corporation is just not going to allow that. But the fact that they're charging money for something that was clearly meant to be the ending of the game is that's just inexcusable.
mm. Yeah, that sounds like typical Ubisoft there.
Yeah.
Yeah, with that. So, all right. Well, thank you, Sage, for your review of Assassin's Creed Shadow.